yeah, I'm just going to reiterate the topic real quick. And my panelists, you're welcome today. It's a pleasure to have you guys here. And let's get into it. All right, so the topic is living local, working global. Techies working globally, right? And this conversation is just really to shed light on, everyone here are awesome people who are based in Lagos, Nigeria, but have a very large global presence, right? Have been able to take on global projects, right? And also deliver at a very high standard, right? And the conversation is pretty much to just shed light on disadvantages. There's this narrative that you're not there in your tech career till you get a job that takes you abroad, right? And everybody has this mentality that, or this pressure that if I don't get a foreign remote job that is ready to take me abroad, I haven't gotten a good job, right? So yeah, so we're going to start, and I think we'll first start with Adesola, right? And the question is, how has the idea of living locally, working globally evolved in the recent years? Remote work came into Africa strongly during the COVID-19 period, and then it has scaled into the standard. Everybody wants to work from home, right? And now it's also getting to the point that people don't just want to work from home for local companies, but they also want to have that access to work from home for global companies. So how has that evolved? Being your role as a chief of staff, you know all these insights. So yeah, please shed some light for us.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm Adesola, Chief of Staff at Okra. So in terms of the trends that we're talking about, I think the pandemic has definitely created a unique opportunity for folks to work globally and to get jobs that are outside of sort of their local context or their local home. And I think what it's bringing about is just additional opportunities to really expand not only your technical skills, but to impact other parts of the world and to even bring forth, Nigerian ideas and Nigerian kind of culture to other parts of the world. So I think that's sort of how it's emerged. But I think taking it a little bit more broadly, I think than that in general. I think some of it, down to the day-to-day, I think, there's an opportunity, one, to get different types of jobs. There's a lot more jobs out there in terms of when you think of a global scale. And you think of the amount of companies that are now looking at talent from all over the place. The pandemic brought about different tools, different opportunities, ways for people to stay plugged in no matter where they are. And so when you're thinking about opportunities for yourself and for your career, you can take advantage of this trend and really think of, okay, not just jobs in Nigeria, but jobs all over the world. And of course, there are benefits to working globally. So of course, I think multiple of us will talk about it on this panel. There's some pay benefits. You can look to get better salaries oftentimes abroad. And I think there's also an opportunity to level up in terms of your skill sets and the types of people that you're working for. So you'll get access to people from all sorts of cultural contexts, different skills, different educational backgrounds, and that gives you an opportunity to just learn and grow as an individual. So I think that's some of the benefits and sort of why the Jackpot wave is happening.
Thank you so much, right? And I'm really happy that you shed light on some of the advantages of living locally and working globally. Now, to the people that live locally or work globally also, right? So this question is pretty much going to go to Ugah and Florence, right? So you can just answer one after the other, right? So pretty much in just few words, right? Can you just share what the advantages and also the challenges of living locally, right, and managing global companies or working with global companies or working with global clients, right? What has been the ups and what has also been the downs for you guys? So maybe Florence can get us started and over to Ugah.
Okay. Hi. Thank you very much, Samuel. My name is Florence. I'm the senior product designer at Shopware. Shopware is an auto repair company based in the US. Okay, so I'm going to start with the advantages, right?
Okay.
Yeah, like she said, great pay. So you have the opportunity to have above, should I say above, basically great pay, sorry. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, there's great pay. And also there's the opportunity for you to save up and travel if you want to travel, if that's part of shall I say, your goal or your life goal. So you have the option to save up all the dollars or pounds or euros you get to travel out of the country to numerous countries, numerous cities, and back to Nigeria while working out of those cities. I think that's something that is really, really interesting to me, and that's one thing I really enjoy. The challenge, though, is, so first of all, the fact that I work with a US-based company, I find myself working late at night. And I don't even think that's a problem. That's never a problem because I'm not a morning person, so that's fine. So I find myself starting my work by 3 p.m. Nigeria time and usually ending by 11 p.m. Nigerian time. So if that is something that doesn't work for you, that's fine. I chose to work within my company's time zone because I love to collaborate with everybody. Design cannot succeed without collaborating with the PM, maybe the engineers and even the customer service team, for example. So I love to be hands-on, and with that, I have to start when everyone is starting, basically, which is 3 p.m. my time, and when everyone is ending, or at least when most of my colleagues are ending, which is 11 p.m. my time. I've spoken to some people about that, and they love their sleep, so that's something they don't want to sign up for, which is also fine. You can also talk to your manager or talk to your colleagues at work and negotiate a flexible time zone for you. But that's something that works for me because I'm not a morning person. What else? Yeah, I think basically I love the fact that I can work from anywhere in the world, not just Nigeria. And I have great pay that gives me access to travel to those places and also access to live comfortably well in Nigeria. Disadvantage is just the time zone thing for me, and also because I've spoken to some people and I think that's also maybe not so good for them, but I like it either ways. Also, culture and the task I'm working on. So at Shopware, our goal is to create a seamless experience for car owners, mechanics, that's what we call them, but over there they call it technicians, service advisors, and so I have to create a seamless experience between everybody in the auto repair space. Me coming from Nigeria with my understanding that I just have to pick up my phone, call my mechanic, and my mechanic is at home to pick up my car, was a I think that was a huge learning curve for me because I had to really understand how over there they rely solely on technology and they always want to improve, shall I say, the communication between everyone in the auto repair space. So maybe in a shop, for example, they want to improve the communications there. And they also want to make sure they are communicating to their customers. So how do we build a seamless experience for everybody? So I had to start on learning how we do that in Nigeria and start relearning how they do it over there, asking a lot of questions, befriending people outside of my colleagues in the engineering department. So maybe talking to someone in customer service or sales just to really understand how they work or how they operate in US, for example. So yeah, I think that was a very long journey for me.
Okay, yeah, cool.
I
think just to highlight one thing that Florence said is that it gives you the opportunity to learn global technology advancement, right? And also it allows you to understand how you can scale that into the Nigerian ecosystem. One of the things that does for her is that, she said, initially, she just knows she can pick up her phone and call a mechanic, right? But understanding the process of what it should take to actually build something quality for that industry. If anybody calls her today and says, hey, we want to do this in Nigeria, it's going to be a no-brainer, right? And she's probably going to be one of the go-to people that they would reach out to and say, you know what, we want to come and scale this into Africa. We need somebody that understands the local ecosystem, but at the same time can address this issue on a global standard. So thank you so much for that, Florence. All right, Ugah, same thing, in terms of advantages and challenges. And I also want you to just touch light on the fact that you've led about 2 design teams. I've worked closely with you on 2 design teams that you've also led cross-functional teams across Africa. You know, when we talk about global, everybody always wants to think about just Europe and just other really standard countries, but at the same time, leading teams with other African countries with different backgrounds. What has just been those challenges, and also being able to still just work on those projects while being in Nigeria here?
Hi everyone, I'm Ugah. I'm currently head of design at Nestcoin. So a bit of context was I started out in 2016 working remotely for US companies, right up until leadership where I am at now. And I think one of the interesting observations as a designer working for companies outside the country with different cultural contexts, and when you're not physically present is, I'm going to take a step back and try to touch on one thing. As a designer, remember that when you're practicing your craft, you're trying to solve something that allows a business get more profitable, engage our customers better. An ideal scenario would just be to be there in person, to understand the markets, to understand the customers, to be there with your teammates. And one of the disadvantages of working remotely with companies in other countries that I observed was not being able to do proper research with the team, not having proper understanding of the markets, and losing some sort of team dynamic. And it kind of has translated to my role in leadership, where I have to hire people that may or may not be in the same city as I am. They might be in another time zone. I think currently we have someone on the team that's it's 3 hours behind Nigerian time. And that little friction in time zone, trying to figure out the best way to work, those things that they find a way to creep into productivity if you don't catch them on early. So what's very important is, as a person, as a designer, before you get into any role in any country, in any time zone, it's very important to have a strong sense of ownership, a strong sense of teamwork. I observed, talking to one or two friends, that some designers have this thing where they get into working for very mature companies, but they're in a role where they're working as individuals. Whereas it's usually very beneficial to you to start your career working within a team where you have a strong sense of responsibilities, you know what is what is how. And then when you graduate into more senior roles, or when you have more experiences, you know how to control your time, you have a strong sense of ownership. I've also observed in managing designers, and as a designer myself, because in my current role, I still pretty much do IC work, where I do design delivery, because I really like design delivery at this point in my life. And I think one thing to keep in mind, working across time zones, working in different teams, is I'll still touch on having a strong sense of why you're doing what you're doing, right? Because if you're working within a company, it's very important to get as involved in why the company is doing what they're doing. It sounds very cliche to say, but the more you get involved with your PMs trying to dissect the business case of what you're pretty much in the market for, you find yourself talking with other roles, you find yourself doing something that's outside your core design role, doing some market research, and all of those things find a way to transcend the overhead of time zone gaps, because you kind of stay ahead of the curve. Where there are frictions with time zone gaps, you've acquired a bit of knowledge on how the business can get a leading edge, how you as a designer can play a pivotal role. And I also think that if, as a designer, you really understand that your role there is to make the entire business model very adaptable to every customer.
Yeah.
And it sounds very cliche to hear designers say, we're solving a problem for the end customer, we're solving a problem for our users, but you need to really understand and get deep into technical details of why you as a designer are trying to solve that problem. And it brings a strong sense of ownership when you're working with teams that are cross-functional, because you're able to adapt to working with an engineer that has to come on your team briefly to walk through maybe an iteration for something that will push the needle further in your product. And benefits of working for companies outside the country are the obvious benefits as the pay. But I also think that be very bullish about the kind of experience you want. Be very, very bullish. So you might find that you can be unfortunate to be in a team that is outside the country, but they may not have given you the technical depth that you would have required as a team that is local. There will be trade-offs with pay gaps where, and I say this to early designers pretty much, if you're an early designer, I don't think you should rush for jobs that are outside the country because you might be trying to bite more than you can chew. And what I mean is, as an early designer, seek to work within a team where your role is well defined. There is less pressure on you to grow very well, and you know your defined roles, and you know how to work within a team. And growing as an early designer, what I learned was that teamwork spirit that kind of overemphasized today is kind of the foundation of how I've become very proactive with ownership in all my roles and up to this level. So work as an early designer, work within teams, be very bullish about the way you want to grow. Write down on your CV, in the next 3 months, I want to have this kind of experiences. I want to have solved this kind of problems. So that when you see a team, when you see a company, you're not, you don't forget to take note of the possible experiences you can get out of that. So I'm advising designers to look at companies and roles through a lens of what experience you can gain and how you can level up. Instead of it being a case of I'm working for a company outside the country, but I'm working for this company where I'll be able to achieve this and this. And there are added benefits to work for companies outside the country where you have the opportunity to collaborate with people that have worked on bigger technologies than you. You have the opportunity to work with people that have more experience in different markets. Those are added benefits, but it's very important to bring it home and know that whenever you're working for any company outside or local, you keep in mind the kind of experiences you want to learn from or get from that work experience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ugah. Right. So yeah, like what Ugah really said was really, really instrumental because as you realized, to work effectively locally, it's also beyond your skill set, right? He mentioned a lot of soft skills on us having business acumen, also just pretty much understanding how to manage clients effectively, right? When you're working locally for a company, even though you're a full-time staff, to be honest, you have to picture yourself as a contractor in a way because any mistake you make, right, it's going to be more costly than somebody who is working right there with them, right? They don't necessarily give a lot of room for minimum mistakes that you can make in a local team that you can also learn from it, right? So it's just really important to know that, right? So, all right, moving to Chimidiebere now, right? Being the technical person on this panel, I'm going to ask you a technical question, right? And I'll share a personal experience. I worked with a company in Finland that pretty much required me to design the product in Finnish. Now, in my experience as a product designer, I've never had to use Google Translate that much, right? And that's just being a product designer battling with language, right? Now, technically, right, there's so many things that are advanced out there, and like working as a developer who has worked on global projects, right, how have you been able to adapt? What has been that learning curve for you? What were the things you were able to leverage that other people here can leverage today and also prepare themselves for those kind of engagements?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Chimdi, technical lead for SmartComplyApp. Right. So to your question, what I would say is a very important thing to know is if a firm has the aim to sort of be diverse, where you are hiring people from different languages and races, right? There is need for something I'll call a communication guideline.
Okay.
So communication is important, but you can't communicate when we are not understanding ourselves. Maybe there's a language barrier. So there has to be a communication guideline. It's important. It's very important that you just join and it helps you communicate whatever you want to share with your team. Is it a problem? Is it an idea? Whatever it is. Because without it, it's going to be very hard.
Yeah.
Very hard. Then on a personal level, right, for you, so let's say you go into a team that doesn't have this. So the communication guideline is for the organization or that manager to create and have. Now for you as a developer, it's sort of your mindset, right? You have to actually be open to learning and trying to communicate. So the idea is to understand what they're trying to tell you. So it doesn't really matter what they are saying. So I'm saying something you're not understanding. I want to understand what you're saying. Can you draw it? Can you sort of illustrate?
Yeah.
I just want to understand what you are saying. So if you have that mentality that, okay, look, I want to do my thing well. I want to actually communicate with this person, right? There are different means you can do that without actually having this language barrier. Someone who cannot speak to you can draw.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't really just matter your mentality in that particular role that you are in. And then with that, you can actually fly.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, like, one thing that you pointed out there, and I think that is just good to also echo that, right? Clarification does not mean that you're not good at your job, right? And in situations where you're working with global teams, as much as possible, you need to clarify, right? When somebody is saying something that you don't understand, you need to make sure that you understand it before taking on that task. Those are the things that actually helps you, right? You find out that when you do performance reviews, right? And I'll share for the experience. I've been in a performance review before where I didn't know the clear criteria for that review, right? And you're flaring up with HR, which I'm coming to Adesola really soon with being a chief of staff, right? And you're flaring up with HR saying, hey, right, like, why am I in performance review? I mean, I've been doing my job well, and you just find out that it's not really about just your skill. There are certain expectations that if you do not clarify personally, you don't know how to meet them, and you can't meet them without clarifying them. So it's just really important that do not be afraid because they might have different colors, or they look different from you, or they speak better English, or they have like the best degrees. As much as possible, if you have that job, it means that you are competent enough, and you should be able to ask for the right clarifications. All right, so moving to you, Adesola. And after that, we'll pretty much just have one question that would go to all the panelists, and then we'll open up the floor for a few questions in the house. Right, so being a chief of staff, right, and this is something that I think that everybody would want to know. And that's like, what exactly, or what roles can local startups play, right, in creating a globally standardized work environment? And I keep saying this because not everybody can work in a Nestcoin, not everybody can work in an Okra, not everybody can work in a Paystack, not everybody can work in a Flutterwave, right? And you look at like the trajectory in terms of treatment to people working in startups, like it's really strenuous. I'd rather just work for a foreign job, even though it's not as comfortable as it should be, but the pay is good, than working in a Nigerian startup that the pay is good, but the environment does not help me improve. A lot of people say they move company to company just because they're not improving the opportunities, they're in positions where they're not feeling heard, right? They're making suggestions that people are not listening to, right? So as a chief of staff, being in that position where you manage a lot of these expectations, and I know like it's a very, very tedious job, right? What exactly can you highlight as the roles that local startups can play, and also what roles have you played in making Okra a globally standardized working environment?
Yeah, no, good question. So in terms of just creating a global standardized environment, it's all about how people work, how people communicate, and sort of the culture that you create on the team. So in terms of how people work, you have to be very, very intentional about the types of tools and resources that you create to make sure that everyone on the team, no matter what location that they're in, has the same sort of access to information, understands the expectations, understands ultimately what they're meant to do in their job. And so in terms of the right tools, it's really important that you have tools like a Slack, for example, that allows anyone to communicate from anywhere in the world. Or it's really important that you have a central information house, right? Something like a Notion, right? That has all of the resources, team pages, team guidelines, employee policies, just making sure that no matter where the person is based, they're able to access the information. At Okra, we have a lot of different employees across a number of different regions. So some folks in some countries in Africa, we have some folks in Europe, as well as some folks in North America, and someone on the team in Canada as well, in North America. So how we sort of do this is by making sure that we have the right tools to really make sure everyone can communicate effectively and get access to the right information. And in terms of just the cultural piece, we're really, really intentional about creating team culture, even if you're remote, right? So there's virtual hangouts. There's also opportunities to bring in folks, right? So at least once or twice a year, we try to bring in different members of the team who aren't local to Nigeria and have a retreat or have some sort of kind of strategy sessions and whatnot to make sure that folks still feel included and they at least understand the cultural context of the company that they're working in, even if day to day they're not based in Nigeria. And then I would say the sort of last bit is just also understanding the advantages of a global environment and making sure that everyone in the team understands that, right? So making sure that different perspectives are valued, people have the opportunity to weigh in, people feel like there's a benefit to having employees in different parts of the world. So we really try to foster a culture of openness and making sure that people really appreciate the fact that, hey, you know, we have team members from Canada who can offer really, really valuable perspectives from their past jobs. We have, you know, people in other regions that have seen a lot of different things and are able to bring those ideas and insights into our day-to-day work. So it's all comes back to sort of like the day-to-day, how we communicate, how we do our work, and then of course creating a culture that really values a global standard.
Thank you so much. All right, so this would be like the last question, and this question will go to everyone, so everyone can just go one by one. And I would like everyone to just pretty much answer these questions from your role, right? From your perspective, from your role. And it's simply, how can we ensure effective communication and collaboration in globally dispersed work environments, right? So from the perspective of a chief of staff, from the perspective of a lead designer, I mean, like Florence is the head of Top Tiles community, right, in Lagos, Nigeria. And I mean, I think everybody here will know. Yeah, that's something that we can clap about, right? And she manages everyone in Nigeria who works on Top Tile. That's a very, very big role. And how have you been able to just manage that communication, collaboration? Also, Chimdi, like from your perspective as a technical lead. So I'll open the floor to who wants to go first. Let's go with Florence.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to start with Shopware, then move into TopTal. So like you said earlier, do not be afraid to ask questions. So when I first joined Shopware, that was 3 years ago, I felt like if I ask so much questions, it probably mean I'm not a good designer. But then again, it doesn't mean you are not a good whatever. It just means you're a very curious person. Do not be afraid to ask why. Like, why so many times? But not why in a way that you're fighting the person. It's just, oh, why do you think we can't do it that way? Have we explored X, Y, Z? And over time, something else I've also learned is saying it back to the person. So we all think we've heard maybe our managers or our colleagues perfectly explain something, and we think we understand what they've said. And we go and we spend, let's say, 3 months working on something and it ends somewhere bad. So basically, the point I'm trying to make is to avoid miscommunication. It's very, very important to say back what you think you're hearing. That's something I've had to learn, not just personally, also observing people I work with because of the language barrier and also the cultural barrier. Like, there is need for me and even for everyone I work with to say back, or is advisable to say back what you think you've heard. So for example, what do you think we're doing here? And they explain it and you'll be like, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, Z. Is that correct? Does that sound right? I think it's very, very important to really over-clarify things with everybody we work with, especially if you're working with any of your colleagues globally, not just Nigeria. So communication and over-communication. There's nothing like over-communication, so that's fine. Within TopTal, TopTal, managing TopTal community has been very interesting. So TopTal is a freelance platform where designers, PMs, engineers, they sign up and they have the opportunity to work with global companies, not just Nigeria. So companies in Europe, in US, and wherever. And as opposed to working as a freelancer on TopTal, there is also the opportunity for your company to buy you out and you get to work with them full-time. So think of it as freelancing, but freelancing to full-time, as opposed to interviewing with the company and going through that stages of interview. You get to work with them for a stipulated period of time, then join them full-time. So managing everyone in TopTal has been really, really interesting, because hearing from PMs, from designers, from technical people, and trying to also give a generic feedback as much as possible. So say things from my point of view, but as a designer, try to see if my feedback works for a PM and also an engineer, basically. And also, in TopTal, just because we're all freelancers, or most of us are all freelancers, we all tend to feel alone, because, and maybe not just freelancers, remote workers, we all tend to feel alone because maybe 90% of our colleagues are based outside Nigeria. So on TopTal, what we've recently started doing is to have like a co-working day where we'll all come together last Friday of the month, turn on our videos, work on different projects with our different clients, talk through the challenges we are facing with our clients, and at the end of the day on Friday, open up a bottle of wine and have like a TGIF, which that is also fun. And similarly on Shopware, so Shopware, they have similar stuff to having like a co-working day, but it's like a summer break, we all come online. We also have like, we call it like a candy day in the week, where we all get like our favorite candy and just talk about your challenges, or just talk about the new fun thing you are doing right now. So I find out that doing all those things increases or improves team bonding, because you get to see someone in their relaxed state. So I worked with this PM that was, I thought the PM was very, very strict, but having seen or having like interacted with this PM in a less official state or manner, I don't know if that makes sense. So maybe in all these social co-working events, I now see another side of the PM, for example. So like we get to talk about a project, but then again, I know that, oh, he's probably under pressure from the founder, because we've talked about this in our last social event. So having, like, creating social events basically improves team bonding, the culture, you get to know people, you get to understand why you think they're shouting at you, but probably they're not shouting at you. So for example, I worked with a Russian PM, and it sounds like she's always yelling at me, but we had the opportunity to, I think that was like a Christmas party, and I found out that that's how she talks. She's just overly passionate and very happy. It's like, oh, Florence, the weather is so good. And I'm like, okay, you don't need to shout, but I mean, that's how she works, apparently. So now, moving on to like maybe a new quarter, and we get to work again. Whenever she's shouting at me, I know that, oh, don't pay attention to the volume of what she's saying. Just pay attention to what she's trying to say and get the work done. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
That really improved like communication, culture, and team bonding in TopTal and also in Shopware. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you so much. Get to know your team members. It helps you understand how they work and why they work the way they work. All right, so Ugah, you can just help us in like 2 minutes, right? Just share your own insight to that, and then Chimdi would.
Hello. Okay. I think in my experience, what also really helps, I think if you're in a situation where, because not all experiences are the same, so certain people might have had a really good experience working for a company that has such a structured communication where everyone has some sort of remote communication maturity. You can be in a company where every single person in the company has been working remotely for the last 7 years. So they've achieved communication maturity. And it's probably your first time, or you could be the only one in the company that has worked remotely, and you've achieved some kind of communication maturity, and you have expectations in a company, and they throw you into this team or this company that doesn't have structure in some sense. And it feels like it's on you to create a communication structure. I think it's also important to have your teammates, or if you feel like communication can be improved, if you feel like the team can do communication better, I always try and suggest to designers that I work with is, if you see, I read a lot of blogs around company and product teams. I read a lot of blogs from, let's say, Uber's design team, Uber's engineering team, Spotify's design team. It gives you more exposure on how other companies, it could be a Flutterwave design team, it gives you exposure to how companies do their work style, and then you have more ideas on how to improve your process, because you might realize that your process is not very efficient. So I always say, let it be a melting pot of ideas for how communication can be done better. But when it comes down to communication and a healthy way to work with teammates, especially in a designer PM situation, it's very important to have occasional check-ins where you're clarifying that you're not spending time working on something that you thought was what was inferred. So let it be, advocate for the entire team to come together. It could be a sub-team, a small unit, to come together and talk about why you're doing what you're doing. Let everyone share their challenges, and then talk about the inefficiencies in your current communication process. So if you feel like communication can be improved, during your town halls or during your get-togethers or during your social Fridays, say, guys, I have an idea of how we can improve our communication. I read from here and here that they did this and it worked, or everyone can share ideas for new ways to do communication, new ways to communicate better, and then you take that as small experiments, and then you see, did this style work for us? Because I think I was in a company some time back, and then we weren't quite achieving communication maturity, and then we kept doing pulse checks on where were the gaps, where were there communication failures at certain points, and then we kept iterating on those processes. Okay, you know what? We're having too many meetings, and it's distracting people, so let's do less meetings, more one-on-ones with managers, or too much one-on-ones with managers. But what's the problem? You're not having time to think through your work. Okay, reduce the one-on-ones, and you just keep moving keep changing things and keep checking to see the effect of those changes. So don't go for a style and say this style works, but keep asking yourself, are there people struggling with this communication style? How many of you? Okay, why? And for most of us, we really appreciate this communication style. And then it becomes a situation where there's a general healthy appreciation for the way you guys do teamwork and the way you guys work together.
Thank you so much, Ugah. All right, over to you, Chimdi.
Hi, okay. So there's something I would want to highlight, and that's sort of something around remote working. Two things actually. One, time management. Time management, that's a big, big problem. Yeah. Whether you are working across time zone or just even Nigeria, the idea is you're working remotely, you have all the time to yourself. That's the beginning of the problem, right? You have to have an efficient time management schedule. You have to know how to manage your time. If not, you just get sucked in, and 1 week is gone. You probably did not even produce what you want to produce. You did not produce, and you did not do anything for your own self. So it's going to be a 1 week that you count as a loss, and it will continue like that if you keep making things, keeping things going like that. That's one. And then the other thing is, if you're in a team, it's important to build relationship. So I'm sure most of us here are introverts, right? We are all introverts. We like our space, our personal space, right? Mm-hmm. So, but when you're in a team, I think the teams I manage, right? I'll tell you, look, the important thing is the relationship.
Yeah.
Right. I can have an issue. I know I have the entire web to find my issue, but if I could just talk to him, I spend less time looking for my solution outside, and then I have my solution here, right? If you don't come out, spend some time to build that relationship with your team members. So normally I would say, okay, it's like it should be a priority for managers to like ensure that relationship around teams are there. Now, these teams I'm talking about, remote teams especially, because when people are outside in their different homes, they feel like they don't care. I just do my job and I close my system, right? But it's important that you connect with people that you're working with. Communication, trust, empathy. These are things that you just have to do with your teams across the globe, right? That you're working. And then if I'm having issues managing my time, and I see somebody that's performing well, month in, month out, year in, year out, if I cannot talk to that person, how do I then improve?
Yeah.
Right? I will just keep doing, iterating over things that I want to try and failing. Because I have someone that I can just, hey, how do you do this? And they'll tell me. So it's one thing. I know me. I'm a developer. I like my space a lot. Like I like my alone time, every day. So if I cannot come out to say, please, I need help. If I cannot trust my team to say, please, I need help, there's a problem. It could be my team, it could be me, but it's important that we can communicate, trust, and build that kind of relationship in the teams we work in, remotely or even physical teams.
Thank you so much, Chimdi. So, Adesola, you can just wrap it up for us in just a few words.
Yeah, no, I think everyone's done a really good job of a lot of ideas. So I'll just kind of speak from the company level. I think it's important to just create spaces for communication and collaboration, but also have guidelines from the organizational level. So making sure that even though you're giving people the flexibility and autonomy of remote work, that you still have parameters around sort of, what are the common working hours, so there can be meetings that overlap different geographical zones. You also have both virtual and physical spaces. So Okra, we have an office here in Victoria Island, but as well making sure that there's still virtual spaces from team members that are not local. So whether that's through Google Meet or Zoom, making sure that you have those tools for your team members. And then making sure, just on the guidelines point again, that people understand the expectations of communication and collaboration. So making sure that they're responding on time, they're reachable, making sure that they know what their working hours are or the common working hours, and just making sure that everyone is aligned on ultimately making sure that collaboration and communication are most important. So I think those are just the few things I would add.
Thank you so much. Can we just put our hands together for the panelists? So we've run out of time, right, and we won't be able to take questions, but the awesome panelists will still be around for a few times, so you can just easily just walk up to them, introduce yourself, and just have a conversation with them. Thank you so much, everyone, for this session, and goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much, guys.